Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey of becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, Milvo here. Welcome to episode 3 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. Before I get into the interview today with my guest, Blase Grinner, I just want to say thank you very much. The response to both the introduction and the response to my story has been extremely overwhelming. The messages, notes that I've received of encouragement, feedback, and knowing that other people out there were able to listen in a non-judgmental way and come back to me with their own stories and how it touched them emotionally. It was just very, very heartwarming to know that what I'm doing and what I'm putting out there is actually seen for what it is meant to be, which is just talking about a story and about a journey and about how we're actually moving forward in this wonderful, beautiful life. If this is the first time that you're actually listening in, thank you for joining. I would encourage you to go back and listen into the introduction and also to episode 2, which is my story, because I feel that that'll help set the scene for the podcast going forward. And for those that have been along the journey, again, thank you very much for jumping on board and listening in to the Unearthed Man. If you do want to touch base with me, then you can find me on all social media platforms, be it LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. Just simply search for the Unearthed Man. Now, on with today's episode. My guest today is engaged to a queen, raising 2 little legends and a transformational coach. His mission is to no longer let men suffer in silence. He creates safe environments and mentorship, allowing men to break free from the shackles, build meaningful relationships with themselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, their family, community, and also finances, whilst living on and with purpose. He spent over a decade in construction as a supervisor and excelling in rugby league, NRL scholarship, captain for Queensland and New Zealand. Leadership is his nature. Though for him, it wasn't always in a healthy way. As a young, uninitiated man, many undealt catalysts stacked on top of one another, leading him to a path of destruction, alcohol and drug abuse, porn and gambling addictions, leading to poor self-worth, confidence and lack of direction, which meant very little confidence and high-level insecurity. This was a catalyst for him to embark on his hero's journey and become a man who could stand on his own 2 feet and finally find his freedom, feel fulfillment, and live a purposeful life, being of service to the men and their families on this planet. He now performs one-on-one coaching, facilitates group workshops, programs, and retreats, and is simply just an awesome human being. Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, Blase Grinner.
Yes. Well, what an introduction. Thank you so much for having me here, Milvo.
Hey, man. Look, it's so awesome that you jumped in on the podcast. I've been excited to have you on board. First guest of the show, and I couldn't think of a better man to get on board. We've been on an amazing journey for just under 6 months, or around 6 to 7 months. And it's been pretty awesome. So I love you, brother. I love you as a man, and I love what you're doing out there. So I'm stoked to have you on board.
Bro, thank you very much for having me. It's been phenomenal, the work ethic that has gone in behind the scenes the past 6 months to get your podcast where it is. I'm excited, man. I'm really excited to see where this conversations, where they go, the impact and the ripples that this creates, not only just here in Australia, but overseas in the globe.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And I think the good news is that, the podcasts are starting to get out more, and we're getting away from, I think, the mainstream business, these sorts of things, and people are looking for something that's a bit different, but they can actually truly touch into and relate to from, coming from their own heart, and they go, yeah, that's me, and that's what it looks like. So, I think it's really awesome. I do want to drop back in, since I got the famous Blase Grinner here, and I'm going to drop into an event.
Yes.
My first event with Blase Grinner was, we had a program, a 2-day, Unleash the Beast from Conscious Man Brotherhood. I'm sitting in, we've gone off, we've done an external exercise. I've come back in, we did a bit of a debrief. And next thing, Blase just casually sort of leans forward in his chair and just pretty much says, is there any man here who may have injured himself dancing? And my first reaction was, fuck. What the wow. And then everything went through my mind and playing on. And so, I got called out. But in Blase calling me out, and for me, it was the most powerful thing because in the end, I ended up being held up by 50 men in tears, just letting all the emotion out. And I've seen videos of it posted, and it still really touches me just on how beautiful that moment. And then I realized how much you can love and trust and support men, and that they are there for you, and they can be there for you if you just learn to let go and let them be there for you. So that was awesome. Your recollection, Blase, of the event?
Yeah, man. It was interesting, man. So everyone was on a lunch break, and this beautiful woman knocks on the workshop door, and it's a closed setting. And we're like, "What? There's a lady here. What's going on?" And she introduced herself, none other than your wife. And she's like, "Oh, I've got some ice here for my husband." I'm like, "Okay, what's your husband's name?" And she told me Melvo. I'm like, "Awesome, no worries." And then there was a little bit of a discussion, and the way that it was portrayed was that that you'd injured yourself and you rang your partner, like a lot of men do. They reach in and reach out to their partner because they haven't built trust, or their trust in men had been taken away or broken. And so, it was a beautiful exercise. We rallied together as CMB leadership team, and we're like, how can we not call this man out, but how can we call him forward? How can we allow him to feel the full force and love of brotherhood, and know that it's safe to actually put your hand up and say, "Hey, I need something," whatever that is. And this ice is just an analogy for a man's needs. And so, we decided to see how it would go, and we had this certain particular exercise in mind if it went that way. And then, I called you forward, and in beautiful Milbo style, owned everything. And then, we encouraged everyone on the Audible to come in and be part of this process where you were leant back into every man's arms, and then we lifted above everyone's head, and we held you there and talked you through a process of being able to surrender and melt into the trust of what brotherhood is, and to let go. And it was a defining moment, man, because that was the moment that gave you and go on this trajectory, and then ignite a beast mode, a warrior. And then for the next 6 months, man, we've been in the close proximity. And now you've launched a podcast. Now you're putting out men's programs. You've signed like 15 dudes into a men's program, like in 6 months. Man, that's crazy stuff. It's like crazy, and not because of the work ethic you put in, man, the love and the heart and the determination and the student mindset and the relentlessness and the ability to take feedback and ask questions, like all of that stuff, man, that juiciness, putting yourself out there and allowing arrows to come is why you're here right now, man. It's why you've launched this podcast, why there's dudes lining up the door to get on this podcast. So, yeah, man.
That's awesome. And look, I tell a lot of people that weekend changed my life, and it changed my life. And you're spot on. I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been through that exercise, and and the support and the love of the group that we've had through King's Court and Warriors Way and the way through has just fundamentally got us to this point in time. So so thanks for recalling and resharing. I'm glad you had the similar memories.
Oh, you're welcome, man. I love that. I love that you didn't tell me about that. Like I was like, oh, that's right. That's right.
I must admit, just to close that off, I did go back that night and walking home to see my beautiful wife sitting there going, there's two options, walking and go, what the fuck were you thinking? or or go, okay, thank you, because if you hadn't done that, the rest of this wouldn't have happened. And yeah, I did choose the latter.
Yeah, exactly, mate. Exactly, because you're a conscious man.
Yeah, exactly. So the other thing we want to touch on today is, and I've spoken about this in my episode just before this, is, you know, I've got an addictive personality and I've had addictions. So my addictions have ranged from simple or silly things, if you want to call it, like watches. I still own every watch I've had since I was 10. I don't know why. Most of them don't work, but there is some attachment and addiction into that.
Wow.
I've got, addicted to porn. I think I probably watched my first porn movie at the age of 15 on the old VHS. That's how old I am. On this DVD and online. That's right. So like the old VHS tapes, trust me, it's a pain in the ass to try and remember what part of the tape you had to go back to your favorite bits. So the addiction's on that, and alcohol addiction. And I've been sober for 17 years now. So I have that addictive personality. It sits in there with me. And so I wanted to talk a bit about today, because I know we talked a bit about in your bio that you yourself have been through that from an addiction point of view. So how's that shown up for you in your life? And then I'll talk about how it's also shown up for me. But yeah, how's that shown up for you?
Yeah, man. So my addictive personality, from the first thing I feel I got addicted to was alcohol from a very young age. Maybe 15, 16, playing a lot of rugby league. I really excelled. So I was around like full grown adult men at a really young age. And part of that male bonding, especially in Australia, was evolved around alcohol. And the more that I could drink, the more props I got. And so I created this persona of this party boy that would just be binge drinking. And really deep down, I was just seeking validation and love. Yeah. My dad left when he was 7, so I was just looking for older men's encouragement. From there, that turned into the party scene, which then turned into addicted to drugs, which then got into like there was just the party scene. But then I actually at one stage about 24, 20, around the ages of 20, 22 to 24, around that era, I was addicted to ice. I was selling cocaine, and just really not a, like I would still work. The one thing that I would do is I'd have it when I got home.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I wasn't like a every single day, though it had me. It definitely had me. I was chasing this short-term fix because I was suppressing my emotions. From there, there's a few tragedies happened in my life, a few big traumas and like big life events, and just started really getting on a downward spiral, man. So I got addicted to gambling. I didn't know how to hold on to money. I was scared of money. And prostitutes, started being addicted to prostitution, and hand in hand like pornography as well. So pretty much like every crux or vice that a man could be addicted to. In my 20s, they had me. They really had me.
Yep. Yeah. And I hear where you're at. For me, I remember setting up a tent in the backyard of my mum and dad's with a school friend, and he snuck whatever grog he could over. I snuck whatever grog I could out of the old grog cabinet, and at 15 we first started to have a drink, and yeah, for me that was it. And interestingly, I never really liked drinking. And that's the bizarre thing, right? Chasing the validation, part of the boys, in the same thing. I started playing senior sport at about the age of 13. I was playing senior baseball and had 18, 19-year-olds in those days that drive you from country town up into Geelong where we used to play. They'd be drinking on the way back. They'd be going to the pub. You were just surrounded by it. And that's sort of all you knew. And then you got into it and got addicted to it. And yeah, for me, I think that's what I knew. That's how I hung out with my mates. And interestingly, later on in my work life, what I found was the people who I would mainly deal with in work were the ones who I could easily influence to say, hey, do you want to grab a beer? A Friday night beer or a Thursday night beer. And I remember going back doing school. I went about the age of 30, I went back to do some more studies. And I remember this lecturer just saying once, pretty much saying, Be careful of the guy who keeps asking you into his office to come and have a drink. He will be the alcoholic. And all he's trying to do is continue to justify his own addiction by finding others that have a similar like, which is you like to actually drink. And that sort of hit me pretty strong. And then when I looked around and looked at the people who I were deeming as friends, outside my 2 or 3 really close friends, we're just drinkers. And they fulfilled my need and my validation through that. And so it's pretty, when you look at that, that I don't hang around those people anymore because the need there is not fulfilled. They're not my friends anymore because we're completely different.
Yeah, that's something that, like everything you're saying, I definitely did as well. I knew that my best friend up until about 4 years ago, since I've moved away from him, I knew that I could ring him any day, any time, and he would come and just have a blowout with me, and we just just keep drinking until we blacked out. And I just knew that, and I was that for him as well. Also, when I went into construction at about age 23, 22, and the 2 foremen I had, they were alcoholics. One of them so heavily alcoholic, he would drink. He'd have in his Prado like this fridge, and he had like VB cans in it inside his work vehicle. And I was young, man, like I was just cutting my teeth, and he would pick me up, and he's like, okay, we'll go do the rounds and just make sure everyone on site sees us. And so we'd go stop in all these crews, say good day. I was in the car with him. We'd just go back to he had a caravan, so his wife and him were traveling. And so we just go back to his place. We'd be back there at 7:30 in the morning, and we would drink until 2:30, 3 o'clock. And he's like, oh, I better get you back to work. And I'd be disgracefully drunk. And then I'd just ring my partner at the time and say, hey, he's done it again. And can you come pick me up? And it's interesting because I'd always say he's done it again. Yet I never, ever once said no.
Yeah.
Never, ever once did I say no. It was like I was enjoying it. I had an elder that I was looking up to. We got along really well. We talked a lot of stories. And I was getting paid. I was actually getting paid. He'd pay me overtime and everything. So it was just feeding into what I was numbing, which was a lot of deep pain, a lot of deep anger was what I was masking with my alcohol addiction.
Yeah. The interesting is a number of jobs I had me actually on the road driving around. I soon worked out which country pubs were 2 hours back from the depot, or two stubbies back from the depot I had to get back to. So you sort of had that awareness that you could have 2 stubbies and maybe not be over the limit. But then again, 2 stubbies in a 10 or 15 minute trip is probably putting you over the limit. And I know I've driven, I've hopped in the car, with my beautiful queen, Jackie, when we were first going out, and I can't remember, actually driving home. That blind drunk. And when you're just putting your loved ones at risk because you're just, driving around doing those sorts of things, it's just not a great state to be in, but there's a feeling of out of control, but there's a feeling of escapism that I think for me came from it. And then now going back and working out what the hell is it that I'm actually escaping from. And that's what I'm loving doing now, is realizing what is it that I was always running away from and facing into that now.
Yeah, man, that's rings so true for me, man. I got in the age of 17 to 18, I got 4 DUIs. I remember the last time there was a time that I had a Suzuki Sierra soft top, this black Jeep. I remember we were coming home one night. I didn't drive, and the police pulled us over, and the dude driving got done for DD. And the policeman said, "We know that the owner of this vehicle is a renowned drink driver." So I had a reputation at 17 years old that the police knew my car, and they knew that I was a reckless drink driver. And that's the marks I wore of like, fuck it, just reckless. Got no, there was no justification or there was no responsibility for any of my actions, and there was I had no cognitive thought of any consequences of anything that I did. And at the age of 18, that's when I was up in front of a judge, and he told me I was sentenced to 3 years jail. mum was in the courtroom too, and she bawled her eyes out. And it was interesting because he when we first walked in, I just had a duty solicitor, and the judge is like, "Mate, is this your representation?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "You're going to jail. I'm going to ask you to get an adjournment. Can you please go get a lawyer?" And I was like, just about to turn 18. So it's like, what? And so that hung over me for like three or 4 weeks, or maybe I think it was about 3 months. I remember the anxiety I had, and like just finishing school. And so, ended up at a very young age having like a massive loan to pay for all of the fuck ups that I'd made. And with the alcohol came a lot of violence. So I was very violent and let a lot of anger out that way as well. And then, when I went back with the solicitor, he said 3 years, you're sentenced to 3 years jail. My heart just dropped. It was just like, oh my God. And then he said suspended immediately, which I didn't know what that meant.
Yep.
And then I'm like, what? And then I was looking at people, so what's that mean? And he's like, you don't have to serve any time. Though, if you get a parking ticket, you will come back, your sentence will be doubled. And and so I was just like, phew. So that was the transition, man. I grew up in Toowoomba, and that was my awakening call. That was like the time. It was like, I need to like stop hanging around the dudes I was hanging around and like make something of my life. And that was the trajectory of like moving to the Sunshine Coast, where I now call home.
Ah, awesome. So the other one that we both spoke about is the porn, and I often get in different conversations where people are going, porn's okay, yeah, it's all right as an industry, and these things are okay, and I have a different debate about that, because it's not, in my view, as much as I've probably supported it for many years. In my view, it's just setting us up for this false sense of what sexuality is, what sexual practice actually is. It's setting us up. These guys are actors. It's like turning around and saying, you know what, I could be Tim Robbins in Shawshank Redemption, and then realizing I can't fucking act to save myself, right? Why did I think I could do half that stuff in a bedroom? But that's what it gets there, and it leads to, for me, a whole lot of other things that come around, premature ejaculation, lack of self-worth and everything else. But it feels to be it's a harder one to crack, in my view. I think that the porn addiction, maybe than the alcohol and the drugs. I don't know your thoughts on that, but maybe because it's so much more easily accessible now via every digital tool that we've got sitting in front of us. Thoughts?
Yeah. So my thoughts around porn have definitely changed over the course of the past year. There's a lady, her name's Catherine Lyle. She's created Integrated Men's Health. She's out of Melbourne, and she comes on she's a porn addiction specialist. She comes on to my group programs as a guest speaker. And it wasn't until she actually started running some numbers and figures and gave me some stats, and then actually told me and the science behind what porn does to the brain of men, how actually detrimental it is. Yes, I knew that everything that you were saying. Like, I was like, I sort of know that, sort of feel that. Though what Kath was telling me is like the stats is like, if you watch porn once a week, you're once a month, that's an addiction. And so, man, when I talk to clients and I say, hey, mate, how often do you watch porn? It's like, oh, only once a month, thinking it's okay. And yet that once a month is still feeding into everything that you just mentioned, man. And so I feel there's been a lot of attention from the government around alcohol and binge drinking, and all the laws have changed. Definitely from when I was growing up, there was Mad Wednesdays and you get dollar drinks and all that kind of stuff. And they've introduced the responsible drinking and alcohol, and that kind of stuff has put a lot an awareness, over the past 15 years, a lot of awareness into the communities, into society around alcohol. And I think there's more people actually saying that they have problems with alcohol. Yet the pornography side of things, this isn't out in the plain sight of every single person. It's done in the dark. It's done in isolation. People aren't admitting it. They're hiding this. yes, there was alcoholics would hide it behind their partners and families, though not as much as what men are hiding porn behind their partners. Like a lot of clients that I when I ask them at the porn, I'm like, does your partner know? And 7 out of 10 men will say no.
Yeah.
And so like that statistic to me is like it's still a dark secret. There's a lot of shame that comes with it. There's a lot of shame that comes with pornography and like men jacking off to it. And it's definitely detrimental in so many fronts, man. Like the intimacy level, the comparing to others, the lack of self-confidence and worth, and then that false sense of a reality, and and that then leads to other things of like domestic violence and all goes on down that path, and sexual abuse. So I don't agree with it, especially after I've found like all of the stats of what it does to the brain. So like pornography, it does exactly the same to the brain as crack cocaine.
Oh wow. I wasn't across that one, wasn't aware of that at all.
Exactly the same stuff. And then so the urge that people are addicted to crack get, and that really fucking hyper vigilant of like, fuck, I've got to have that fix, is the same feeling men get when they have that sexual thought come in, because we haven't been taught as men how to transmute that sexual energy and how to be with that energy.
Yep.
So, and like, I can't remember this isn't even what Kath taught me, but I remember learning about how often men have sexual thoughts per day. And it's like up there. It's up into like almost hundreds. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember hearing, it's like, holy shit, that is true. And I started being consciously aware of like how many sexual thoughts I would have a day. And men have that sexual thought, and then the neural pathways kick off like a crack addict, and then that hunt begins of like when we're gonna watch porn, when we're gonna jack off to it, what porn are we gonna be watching, and then all of this like fantasy starts to build up and build up and build up, and then that same level of excitement, fulfillment, desire, lust, love that we put into porn doesn't then get reflected into our beautiful relationships.
Yeah. Yes.
So then we just lose intimacy. We lose connection with our partners.
Oh, absolutely. So my background is, Catholic, church every Sunday, go to the confessional all the time. So, my sexual education was, I think a school friend's dad who was a doctor turned up and just told us how the biology worked, and that was about it, right? The rest was like, work the shit out yourself, and it was all full of shame and guilt. Like we were we had to go to confession if we had a sexual thought. Didn't do anything. You'd have to stand up and say, yes, sorry, I saw two of the girls across in the classroom and I looked at their boobs. Can I ask for forgiveness? And you were shamed at just noticing the female. And that's the stuff they talked about. If you've had these thoughts, if you've fornicated, if you've done that, it's bad. Come in here and you go and do all the Hail Marys and that. And that's what you grow up as, doing 13 years at school in Catholic schools and everything else. And I'm not against the Catholic schools because they're awesome. But when you bring that level of what I believe is uneducated shame to young people in their formative years, there's no doubt there's sometimes where you go, what is out there? Like, what are you hiding from me? Maybe I'll go and find that stuff. If it's so bad, maybe it's going to be pretty good. And then you're right. They're not knowing that the chemical reactions and that kicks on with it, that chase for that, whether that hit and everything else comes along, and then you just keep going. And again, it's what am I masking? What am I missing? What am I trying to fill into my life that doesn't exist, that I'm getting, be it with my partner or wherever else, or just that I'm not getting with myself.
And then that sexual mask of like, remember Lewis Howes has written a book around the masked masculinity. There's 9 masks, and one of them is that sexual mask. And so pornography really feeds into men then objectifying women and having women as a trophy, and then just like money. So a lot of men chase money to then have a stature and an identity, and then sexual conquest are the same thing. The more women I can sleep with, the more of a man I am. And then back when I was playing football, I would get patted on the back from the older dudes. They would be reliving their younger youth through me and my stories, and then patting me in the back. And I would be loving it because I was getting attention. I was getting the acknowledgement that I really nurtured, that I really desired, but it was coming from a really unhealthy way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's get into so we've talked about some of the negative aspects of addictive personalities, and so there's many things that we could be addicted to. In understanding that, if that's what sits there, how do we make that something positive for us? Like, how do we redirect? Because if addiction is energy and it's a resource we can tap into, then there's got to be a really positive way that we can say, hey, how about I turn that not from a shame and guilt addiction, but to this is me being positive and powerful and tapping into that resource and redirecting it. So thoughts?
Yeah. The way that I figured this out was there's a few things in life that I completely cut out. So like gambling, cut it out. Pornography, cut it out. Drugs, cut it out. The alcohol's been my biggest crux over the past, I'm 36, 36 years. And so I started looking at like going sober for like blocks of time. And so I've done, I think about in the past 4 years, I've done a 9-month block, a few 3-month blocks and a 6-month block, and went completely sober. And so what I realized is that if I commit to something, I have an addictive personality and I'll follow it through. So if I said I'm sober, I'll follow it through. If I'm drinking, I will go drink and drink and drink and drink. There was no middleman for me. There was no just having 2 drinks for me. Yeah. And it took me a lot of lessons to realize that, okay, cool. And it wasn't even just realize, it was actually admit to myself that I actually have an addictive personality. And so now I understand, cool, I have an addictive personality. So knowing that, I can channel that addiction into something that is meaningful and purposeful and actually fulfills my heart, soul, body, and mind in a effective manner. Whereas, like, I'm not saying that alcohol's bad, though for me it is. For me personally, alcohol is bad because I don't know when to stop. It demotivates me. I feel lethargic. And then when I'm hungover, I then don't follow through on the commitments of what I believe my integrity is as a man. And so for me, alcohol doesn't work. And I had to admit that to myself and realize, cool, I've got an addictive personality. What am I going to channel that into? And so channeling into my family, channeling that addictive personality into my partner, into my work, into my health, and finding other avenues to redirect that energy and still have that same addiction, yet it is beneficial to my health, beneficial to my mental state, beneficial to my spiritual development, to my work ethic. So yeah, man, that's how I've been able to redirect the mindset around addiction, because that I used to hear people say I've got an addictive personality, and I used to think that they were talking themselves into an existence of what alcoholism or being addicted to porn or something like that. And I would judge them. I would have a judgment of them that it was wrong. And then when I realized, well, okay, cool, I do have that aspect that's a part of me. Rather than judging it and wronging it, how about I embrace it and actually then, okay, cool, I do have that. And how can I make that an effective quality?
Yeah, and awesome. And I've seen that show up in myself a lot. I deliberately don't gamble. So I've never been addicted to gambling, but I know I won't do it because of that same thing. I know there's a trait that sits in me, the addictive personality. So I've converted it into see a mountain, climb a mountain, finish that one, see another mountain, climb another mountain, finish that one. And I know when I'm starting to get low and, starting to emotionally eat and do these other things that are around me is because I haven't found the next mountain to go and climb. So, just recently I did the Peter Pub swim down at Lawn, 1.2K ocean swim, had to go and do that. And so put everything into it. And so there was my mountain, went and climbed the mountain and had an amazing emotional release after that. The podcast, what we've been doing with King's Court Warriors Way to a degree is a whole brand new set of stuff I've never done before. I've never been involved before. So throwing, as you said earlier, throwing everything into that space is me tapping into that's the addictive personality. That's like, if I'm going to put in it, let's get into it. Let's get to that mountain. What I am learning along the way, which I probably haven't done as much before, is how do I love the journey to getting to the mountain? And that's the key. I'm now learning about. I've got the energy and I've got the drive and I can tap into that where I want to go. But am I too focused on getting to the top of the mountain to work out to come down the other side to find the next one? Or am I actually slowing down and going, this is a really cool, fun time and I'm really going to enjoy this, and slow it down and just even manage that? So rather than having the energy at full tilt, just bringing it back to say, I'm now going to work through this and enjoy every step and slow myself down. And now I'm really loving being in that space and enjoying all these things that I'm now doing around the podcast. And
yeah, man, that victim worker and then winning mindset. It's that worker mindset that you mentioned of like, get in there, get the result, climb that mountain, like get, and then I'll be happy. I've actually caught myself in that with the declaration in Warriors Way about having the beers. When was that? 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And just knowing that it was that it's against my integrity, and really coming to that decision of like, cool, I've got my limit now. It's like one drink and that is it. And through that, over the past 3 weeks, I've been reflecting of like exactly what you're saying, man, around the mindset of it. And it's been interesting that because I had actually beaten myself up because I slipped on an agreement that I had within myself, though I definitely needed to learn the lesson. And I've watched now over the past 3 weeks, the mindset of the worker creep back in of like, I need to do more. I need to be doing more in the business. I need to be getting back in I need to do. Yep. And the past couple of days, I've caught that, and it was like really anxious. I felt really anxious. And now I'm like, okay, cool. Come back into that winner mindset. Like, who do I need to be so that I can do what I need to do and I can have everything that it is that I want to have? And so I really dropped in the past couple of days, like, okay, who do I need to be? And it was exactly what you just said, man. It's like, I need to be a man that is enjoying this process. Like enjoying the process of building up the business, enjoying the process of creating this new program, enjoying family time, not rather just ticking the boxes and getting it done, but really falling in love with the process. And in falling in love with that process, really is going to attract a lot more abundant lifestyle, which is what I really, truly desire.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. So your time's been awesome with me tonight. I love the fact of how open you've been. For the men out there that are listening, or the women who, men and women who could be listening there, what's a message that you'd like to drop out to someone who, in the back of their mind, they sort of, because we all know we have an addiction, is whether we admit to it, something else. So what's a thought or something out there for the people to say, how to acknowledge it, how to take that next step, or how to reach out to somebody, and what does that look like for them? Just a thought.
The question I always like to ask is like, at what cost?
Yep.
At what cost? And so if I was to drink, at what cost? If I was to do drugs, at what cost? And so looking at the consequences, because I believe there is no right or wrong in the world. And if we're able to ask ourselves, at what cost is me having these beers? At what cost is me smoking a pack of cigarettes a day? Like, and asking ourselves at that cost. And if we can see the cost, if it's a cost that we don't want to have, then we're able to ask ourselves the question of like, why? Like, we can see the cost, and it's like, okay, then why? Why do then I want to become bigger than an addiction? Like, why do I want to become bigger than addiction? And if your why is big enough, you can do anything. If that why, it gets you up out of bed. If the why is big enough, you'll be able to stop it. I just remember my mentor, he was sober for 7 years. And I'm like, man, that's a huge commitment. And he's like, not really, man, because all I did was just said no to alcohol one day at a time. I'd wake up in the morning and just made alcohol my enemy and just said, not today, brother, not today.
Yep.
And then every single day turned into 7 years, but it was one day at a time. And that's how he went 7 years sober. And that's where I'm at now. It's just, just acknowledging the urges, just like not today. For me, what I really enjoy is making commitments and like really voicing my commitments and to support groups and brotherhood and like men's groups and men's circles that I'm in, because I know that it's so easy if I make a commitment to myself to talk myself out of it. The mind is the greatest storyteller in the world. Sometimes those stories are actually true. Yet, if I declare my word and my commitment to other men, one, they're going to hold me accountable to it. And two, there's this challenge that then arises within me to actually like meet that commitment and be my word and leverage off myself. And then like in the personal development world, there's so much like, oh, you're going to do it for yourself. Yes. And we also have an ego. And so why not use it as leverage and use that people pleaser trait as an effective quality to get past something, and use that trait and that leverage of like not wanting to be shamed in front of other people for slipping or turning or not being my word, and use that as fuel to become bigger than something. So yeah, if you have like if for people that are really down that addiction hole, there's a lot of like avenues you can turn to, and a lot of like beautiful community services and government funded stuff that you can turn to get into rehab centers and like get to go into the 12-step programs, that kind of stuff. But the people that are in the moderate section, that it's hindering them, but they can still like it's not hindering that much. I really highly suggest to get into some men's groups and get around some men of like mind that talk about vices, that understand what a vice is, that talk about vision and where they want to be going. And then you can start to really examine like, is this thing working for you? The same man, Preston Smiles, who's my mentor, he asked me one day, he's like, what do you need to give up in order to be successful? And I sat with that for a few days. And I'm like, man, it's alcohol. It's alcohol. If I gave up alcohol, everything in my life shifts. Everything. And that was just what for me. Some people it's other things, but yeah, for me it was like alcohol. And so that could be a question that you can ask yourself. And what does success look like for you? So first would be that question. What does success look like for you? And then what do you need to give up in order to be that person?
Yeah. And that's awesome advice, man. And I really appreciate that. And I'll follow the same as Blase. I'd encourage anybody that, if you are deep into, deep drugs or other things, then yeah, there are definitely a lot of good professional services out there. But if you're just knowing that there is something holding you back, or there is some other, moderate thing that's sitting in there that you just sort of feel it's not the right thing, but you don't know where to go, the men's groups, the men's circles, just being able to, the stuff where I've had men just being able to just release and say, this is what's happening to me, or this is what's going on. And you just watch the whole shoulders drop and you watch the sigh of relief come out and go, fuck, I've been carrying that for so long and this feels so good. And I'm not the only one. And this is what the basis of this podcast is about, to say, we're just men. There's nothing extraordinary about us. We're guys who've had pasts, we've had stories, we've fallen into traps. We are now in a position where we've seen it, we've recognized it. We're not judging anybody for it, because, Catholic background, but the one thing that, a lot of books, if you like, call the Bible a book, he who has not sinned cast the first stone. There's not many of us men out there that would be throwing stones. So
none.
Yeah.
None.
So we're all holding it. We just feel that we're unique, but we're not. We've all got some shame and some guilt, and we've all done some shit in our lives. And and this is the podcast is to hopefully show men that that's where we're at, and we can be above it. We can move beyond it, and we can find that why, that purpose in our life that keeps us playing above the line and keeps us playing in a conscious space and being accountable for what we're doing. So on that note, I am going to say, Blase Grinner, I love you, man. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you're bringing to the table. Thank you for being my first guest. It's a massive honor that you signed up and said yes. That means so much to me. Quite emotional at the moment because it's actually quite good. So, man, I love you for the fact of what you've done for me. I love the fact of the support you give me and that you've been on here. So take care, my man. Take care, my brother. And you look after that beautiful family and that beautiful fiancé of yours.
Will do, man.
All right, cheers. That was the amazing Blase Grinner. Thanks for listening in to episode 2 of the Unearthed Men podcast. If you're looking to find me, you can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn or Instagram. Just search for the Unearthed Man. But for now, take care and sending you much love and peace.